Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and tonight we are making conch chowder. It is something that is an absolute staple here in the Caribbean, and you can find most of the ingredients to make it in the local grocery store. So sit back, hit the subscribe button, and enjoy the video. Alright guys, so on the counter tonight we have a fair amount of bacon here in the pot. We got about 6 slices of bacon just to get everything going, give it some nice depth, nice salty pork, get some fat going. We're going to add in some onions and about 4 cloves of garlic that's sliced nice and thin to that. We're going to add a little bit of flour to help soak up the fat before we add in half and half. That way we get the nice thick rich body that we want for the chowder. We're going to add in some mushrooms, some bell peppers. I got red and green here, just some that were in the refrigerator I need to get rid of. Got a little bit of carrot and 1 ear of corn, 4 stalks of celery, 4 new potatoes. I'm going to cut those up later. I just don't want to do that too early, and we're going to cook those in the chowder. On the side here, I got just a little bit of coriander, a little bit of celery salt, and some ground bay leaf, just to give it a little bit of background flavor, and some red pepper flakes to give it a little bit of depth. Also, the Worcestershire. I'm going to add just a touch of Worcestershire to it, just to round it out and give it a little bit of body. And then we're going to finish with some toasted coconut flakes here. As you can see, we have some dried coconut. We're going to toast that off in the oven and then add it to the chowder. So here we go. And of course, I've got about 1 pound of conch here that's just been cleaned really well, diced up, and then ran through a food processor to make sure it's not tough. Alright guys, to get started here, I'm going to go ahead and just turn this bacon on to medium-high heat. And I'm going to cover it with a lid just to kind of help it come up to temperature and let some of the fat start coming out a little bit faster. So now that the bacon's come up nice and high to temperature, I'm going to drop the heat to medium-low, because as I mentioned, I am trying to get a lot of the fat pulled out of here, because that's where a lot of our flavor is. We want it to disperse throughout the food, and we want it to get nice and crispy, so we're going to keep cooking it. Alright guys, as we can see, now the bacon is starting to get nice and hot. A lot of the fats came out of it, and it's starting to get really crispy. So now is a good time to just take and add in the onions and garlic, and that's going to add a little bit of moisture back to the pan for the bacon fat to cook out of the onions, concentrate the flavor, and build another layer here. So we're going to give this a few minutes and let it sweat down. Alright, so you can see that our onions are nice and translucent now. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1 really good pinch of the red pepper flakes in there real quick. And kind of kick that around, let them wake up a little bit. You're going to be able to smell when the fat makes them really start getting the flavor released in there. And then that's a really good time. I'm going to add about 2 ounces of flour to start and see how that looks. Basically, we only want and need enough flour here to soak up the fat from the bacon. That way it doesn't separate later on. If we add the flour, it's going to help it thicken as opposed to separate the fat out. So now that the flour is in and everything's absorbed, as you can see, we're starting to take a little bit of color. We're going to go ahead and add in the half and half. I'm adding in a total of 3 cups, but I'm going to do this in stages here. So the first stage, I'm just going to add a little bit to it and get it up to temperature, which is where I'm going to grab a whisk. This is where it's going to be really thick, and we're going to use the half and half to somewhat deglaze the bottom of the pan and get a lot of the color that's starting to form off there. And as you can see, as this comes up to temp, it's getting really thick, and we're perfectly fine with that because we know we're going to be adding 2.5 more cups to this. So there's another one. We see now it's starting to thin out just a little bit, but as it heats back up, it's going to thicken up just a little bit more, okay? So slowly add in your half and half. And the reason I didn't add it all at once is because I want to make sure that I get all the clumps out of the flour as it comes up. If you add it all in at once, you're trying to get the flour to separate out and be smooth, and it's a lot more difficult with a lot more volume in the pot. So it's just easier if we do it in stages. So now I'm going to go and add the rest of it. That makes about 3 cups in total. And now we just let it come up. Since all the dairy's in now, we can go ahead and add in the carrots, the bell peppers, and I'm gonna go ahead and grab the celery and corn and the mushrooms. So at this point, all of the veggies are in, and I'm just gonna stir these things in together. Make sure that we have enough liquid here to cover. It's looking a little bit full, so I'm gonna go ahead and add 1 more cup of half and half. I'm gonna add 1 dash of the bay leaf, and I'm gonna go ahead and add about a teaspoon of ground coriander. We can also go ahead and add 1 good dash of Worcestershire sauce and stir these things together. And as this heats up, that's gonna start letting those flavors incorporate into the liquid, and it's gonna thicken up a little bit, okay? So right now, like I said, we added 1 more cup of the half and half to make sure that it's nice and thin, and it's gonna come up and thicken up. All right, so while we're waiting for this to come back up to temperature, it's important that we keep it stirring to make sure that everything starts heating up and cooking and thickening up evenly. And while we're waiting here also, I've decided to go ahead and stick the coconut into the oven. We're gonna go low and slow. I'm on about 325 right now so that we can cook it evenly. I'm gonna go ahead and add in these potatoes that I've diced up also, and make sure that they get nice and submerged, and let it all cook together. So now that everything's in, it's a lot of just seriously just waiting and making sure that you keep it stirred, just that way that nothing sticks to the bottom or nothing. Like if you notice that it gets too thick, you can always thin it back out or whatever you need to do just to make sure that everything goes well. Alright, now that the chowder itself came up to a light simmer and we can tell everything's going well and it's thickening up like it should, I'm going to go and add in the conch now. And as I mentioned, it's about 1 pound of conch, and it's minced in a food processor. That way there's no chance of it being tough, because if you've ever worked with conch, you know that it begins a lot of times really tough, and we have to do everything we can to fight that. So that's why you find it a lot of times in fritters or chowders or things like that. So we're just going to stir it in. We're going to give this about 30 more minutes of just simmering together and make sure that the conch cooks really well. Make sure it stirs in really well also, because if you have any larger clumps, they could potentially cook together, and you just want to make sure that it's spread throughout. So the chowder's been simmering for about 20 minutes now, and the coconut's done. It's nice and toasted. Like I said, we went low and slow, so it toasted nice and even. And we're going to go ahead and mix it in. Get the flavor working in there as well. And go ahead and taste it. And it needs the salt. So now is when we're going to go ahead and add our first touch of celery salt, just to give it a little bit of depth and flavor. So we're going to start with about 2 teaspoons of celery salt. Stir it in, and now we're going to go ahead and cover it and cook it until the potatoes are done. We're going to give it about 20 more minutes and see what happens. Alright guys, so I did go ahead and add about 3 more teaspoons of celery salt to it, and as you can see now, it's nice and thick again, and the potatoes are fully cooked. They're not mushy, but they are nice and soft. So give it a good stir and serve it up. Alright guys, as you can see, I chose to put garlic bread croutons and shaved green onions on top of my conch chowder. Let me know if you put anything with yours. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.